So the reason I'm not too concerned about this remember me parameter working at this point is that I'm going to get rid of this and replace it. So while this makes sense, you have some forms on a page, you give them some names, you create a method, you create some parameters on your method, and ASP.NET uses what's called the binding model to magically link them up and put your text values in these parameters, right? Nice, pretty, it works. Well, as you start to build out more complex controllers, more complex views, you're going to run the chance, a high chance, that you're going to want to submit larger and larger chunks of data and more complex data. So instead of listing out all your parameters, because let's say we add another box on there, well, you're going to have to go back and adjust this action. You have to add an additional parameter in between the curly brackets. Parentheses. Instead, wouldn't it be nice if you just create a new property on a class and then let that class always represent the data that's coming into the form, which then brings us back to our login view model. And so instead of listing out 3 parameters, we can simply say action result login view model. I need to bring in my using statement, so that was control period, and Visual Studio brings up that accelerator. I'm going to choose using 15fs class project.models, that's my namespace. I'll just call my variable login VM. So inside of my login view model are my properties and my methods and all my other fancy work that I was doing there. So username, password, remember me. So those are the same 3 input values that I'm looking for represented inside of my view model class as properties. The model binding engine will actually comb through each property inside of this class and do its best to try to match up one of those input fields from our form, the name, to one of the properties within Visual Studio. Sometimes it tries so hard that it even ignores the name and sometimes just says, oh, that's a string and that's a string, and it'll put stuff in it. It doesn't always happen, but you end up in these rare cases where it does. So you always have to go back and go, what the heck did it do? So with doing that, we have to change this up a little bit. So login VM dot username. Login VM dot password. Login VM dot remember me. I'm going to go ahead and put a breakpoint here. Now, if you remember last time, I ran this outside of debug. So I made those changes to my code. My website is still active. IIS Express is still running. So I'm going to go up to build, and I'm going to do rebuild solution. So I've now rebuilt all of my code. If I come back and refresh this page, you'll see a slight delay in the reload of the page. That's not what I wanted it to do. And that slight delay was due to it rejigging those DLLs. So now I want to debug this. So if I flip back to Visual Studio, if you go under Tools, for me it's the second option on the list. It says Attach to Process. This will allow you to attach Visual Studio to any process running on your machine, or if you have remote debugging enabled, you can actually jump into a server and debug a process right on the server. So this is listing all the processes that are running on my computer. This is essentially a snapshot view of what you would see in a task manager. And what I'm looking for is IIS Express. As a side note, if you're running full IIS, your ASP.NET MVC processes come up as W3WP. and that stands for World Wide Web, W3, Worker Process, WP. That's basically the individual threads or app pools that IIS spins up for ASP.NET apps. So put that in your back pocket. So we want to debug on IIS Express, which is where our web app is running. So I select the process. If you don't see everything, you may have to check this box down here that says show processes from all users. I'm in this often, so that box is just checked by default. So once you select the process, hit attach, and Visual Studio is now attached, debugging IIS Express. What we've done by hand is what happens typically when you push that start button. Visual Studio spins up, it kicks off your process, it attaches the debugger to the process that it started, and puts you in debug mode by default. What we've done is done it in a few steps. We kicked off the process without debugging, then we came back and attached the debugger after the fact. So now that we're in debug mode, we can flip back to our app. Do some things, check some boxes, hit the button, and we hit our breakpoint. If we mouse over login VM, we can expand this, and we'll see that our password is there. Our username is here, and then that remember me. I have to figure out what's going on with that thing. Should be right there. Yep.
You didn't add the HTTP post attribute. I don't know if that's in that.
Thinking about the remember me?
Yeah.
I don't know. We can try it. I mean, it's picking up the post event, but we can give it a shot.
Because it works for me, that's the only difference.
You put the post on there?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll add the attribute and see what happens. So I add the attribute, I hit F6 to rebuild. For me, I usually do Control-Alt-P, which brings up that process attach. I start typing IIS, I find it, I hit enter, and it attaches the process. So it's a few keyboard strokes. Once you get comfortable with it, it beats me going tools, attach process, all that jazz. So once you get in the habit of doing it, it's no big deal. You'll notice here that my debug symbol is empty and it has a little yellow exclamation mark. That's because Visual Studio believes technically that the code running on the server now does not match up to what is running inside of Visual Studio because I just made a code change. When I come back, Visual Studio catches up with itself and realizes I'm now running the same code. So I'll do tests, log in again. Oh, mine still says false. I don't know what's going on. But my objective here is for you to see that we have a class, login view model. ASP.NET is actually going through and creating an instance of that object. It's then pumping our form values into that object. And then we just deal with or treat that object just as we would anything else. So if we need to add another field, we make that change into the view model. We don't have to necessarily worry about the controller. I mean, we probably will because we're making a change, but all of those pieces are synchronized. So as data comes and goes between those layers, it's all strongly typed. So there we go. All right, so that's really bugging me, so I want to know what's going on here. Let me go back. Re-request the page. So what I did is I changed the name of the checkbox to be always login. Still came back false. The only thing I can think of is the fact that it says on.
You need it to say to string. Converting that to a string. No, the model binder should handle that, but I thought it typically says true, not on. Or checked. So I don't know. I'll have to play with that and figure out what's going on.
I'll just feel like you uncheck it and then submit it, does come out stops submitting.
It actually drops it completely. Oh, you mean back on the server side? No, it still says false. And it drops it entirely, doesn't even bother. Alright, let's try one more thing.